vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 16th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: the artificial intelligence boom and changes in the city's leadership have helped lift the real estate market in San Francisco, where rents rose 14% in February from a year earlier. FHFA Director Bill Pulte said the Trump administration was optimistic that it could make homes more affordable, relying on potential orders that include measures to boost new construction. Cross-border payments company Air Wallets plans to invest $1.135 billion to expand across Europe over the next 5 years after a decade of growth in Asia Pacific. Black women are starting their own businesses at a faster clip than any other demographic in America, and a less hospitable corporate world has a lot to do with the burst of entrepreneurship. Rivian is betting its survival on the rollout of the R2 Sport utility vehicle that will be launched into an EV market weakened by the elimination of U.S. tax credits. Paul Reagan pleaded guilty to 3 felony charges of securities fraud following a series of Wall Street Journal articles in 2024 on the financier and his mysterious high-yield investment offerings. Elon Musk said that he was rebuilding XAI from the foundations up as the company's pioneering team departs and competition with OpenAI and Anthropic intensifies. Corporate chieftains who admired Warren Buffett's down-to-earth letters to shareholders are attempting to emulate them. Now for the key articles under the worldwide section. Trump and top aides spent the weekend framing their Iran operation as a military success, while imploring other countries to join their effort to resolve a worsening energy crisis related to the Strait of Hormuz. State income tax systems are becoming increasingly polarized, with Republican-led states attempting to cut individual income taxes and Democratic-controlled states moving the opposite way. Airline executives urged Congress to restore Homeland Security funding and pass bills ensuring key airport workers get paid during government shutdowns. U.S. trading partners urged Trump to stick to agreed tariff levels after his administration began probes aimed at replacing the levies struck down by the Supreme Court. China resumed flying military aircraft near Taiwan's main island after a recent mysterious hiatus. North Korea's Kim Jong-un oversaw a live fire exercise for a rocket launcher able to propel tactical nuclear weapons. 4 more Iranian women's soccer team members who were granted asylum in Australia decided to return to Iran. Russia stepped up tests of systems to block the internet, shutting off mobile access in Moscow in recent days. One battle after another won 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, while Michael B. Jordan and Jessie Buckley took the main acting honors. The picture on today's front page shows a huge aircraft with 3 to 4 soldiers working on it. And that caption reads, "A crew worked Sunday on a U.S. Air Force B-1B bomber being used in the air war against Iran at its base in Fairford, England." The article, "Trump wants to secure Hormuz, but his options all carry risks. Controlling the strait would mean lengthy warship presence or big ground operation," by Jared Malzahn. President Trump has vowed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the vital artery for the world's energy supply that has been closed off by Iran. It won't be easy. Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have repeatedly pledged that naval vessels will escort oil tankers and other ships through the strait. On Thursday, Trump said escort operations would begin very soon. In a pair of social media posts on Saturday, the president called on other nations to help. The U.S. is holding off on sending warships into the strait, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, with Navy officers saying Iranian drones and anti-ship missiles could turn the area into a kill box for U.S. sailors. One option to clear the way for escorts would be a more intense use of air power to hunt and destroy Iranian missiles and drones before they could be fired at ships in the strait. Another would be to use ground troops to seize the territory around the waterway. The administration has said it is keeping all options on the table, including the use of ground troops. On Friday, Trump ordered a Marine Expeditionary Unit, which typically has warships with thousands of sailors, attack jets, and 2,200 Marines to the Middle East. In an escort operation, U.S. warships, maybe in conjunction with allied navies, would travel through the strait alongside oil tankers to clear mines and fend off Iranian attacks from the air, as well as from Iran's Mosquito fleet of small, fast attack boats. Experts estimate it could take 2 ships per tanker or a dozen ships to guard convoys of 5 to 10 tankers to have the necessary air defenses. The short distances involved make shooting down missiles and drones more difficult. Despite weeks of U.S. and Israeli attacks that have decimated Iran's navy and military capabilities, its commanders are still demonstrating the ability to strike. Brian Clark, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a veteran naval officer, estimates that, alongside warships, it would require at least a dozen MQ-9 Reaper drones patrolling the skies and striking Iranian missile and drone launchers when they pop up on the coast. That's thousands of soldiers and sailors and a pretty sizable investment of money, and you might have to do it for months, Clark said. Other military experts have proposed other aircraft, such as the Marines' Harrier jump jet, as an option to support the escorts. Committing ships to tanker escorts means taking them out of offensive roles or broader missile defense. Trump on Saturday said he hopes countries including China, France, and the UK would send ships to help with the task. Japan on Sunday said the threshold for deploying naval forces to the Strait of Hormuz remains extremely high, while South Korea said it would review Trump's call, and U.S. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband said Britain was talking with our allies about ways to reopen the waterway. Delays caused by security measures and the number of available warships would reduce tanker traffic through the strait to 10% of its normal level, according to Lloyd's List Intelligence, a leading shipping analysis firm. At that rate, it would take months to clear a backlog of more than 600 international trading ships stuck in the Gulf. Even with that effort, there would remain a significant risk that Iran could land punishing blows, damaging or even sinking warships and commercial vessels. Its anti-ship cruise missiles are mobile and can be moved quickly for hit-and-run attacks. The Navy last year decommissioned 3 old minesweeper ships that had been stationed at the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet in the Persian Gulf nation of Bahrain, sending 4 literal combat ships to replace them. A more expansive military option would be to raid or seize control of a swath of southern Iran to ensure the country's forces can't fire on ships in the strait. That would likely require thousands of troops and a commitment to what could be months of operations in which U.S. forces would be exposed to attacks from a regime fighting for its survival. The raid option would start with extensive airstrikes along the coastline. That would be followed by U.S. troops landing in southern Iran, most likely Marines making an amphibious assault in the area of mountainous, rough terrain. Maintaining control of the area would require an invasion, military analysts said. The U.S. would try to suppress Iranian ground forces with airstrikes, keeping them away from the landing force, though there could be direct combat. Any U.S. troops on the ground would remain targets for Iranian attacks. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, 190,000 troops strong, and its Quds Force specialize in asymmetric warfare and have spent decades backing insurgents throughout the Middle East. To secure the shipping lanes, U.S. troops might have to be deployed in Iran for months or longer. Reducing, not eliminating the threat of Iranian strikes might not be enough to persuade shippers to use the strait. Only an end to the fighting with Iran, along with assurances from the Iranian government that it will stop attacking ships in the Gulf, would be enough to resume the normal volume of traffic of more than 100 ships a day, military and oil and shipping industry analysts said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. U.S. hails war gains even as it seeks out assistance. Countries are being asked to protect the flow of oil with escorts out of Gulf. By Alexander Ward, Lindsay Ellis, and Robbie Gramer. Washington. President Trump and top aides spent the weekend framing their Iran operation as a resounding military success, while imploring other countries to join their effort to resolve a worsening energy crisis related to the Strait of Hormuz. The Trump administration, as soon as this week, plans to announce that multiple countries have agreed to form a coalition that will escort ships through this waterway, which runs along the Iranian coast, U.S. officials said. The potential coalition members are still discussing whether those operations would begin before or after the war ends. The White House declined to comment on the expected announcement, which could shift depending on battlefield conditions. Trump said Sunday that the administration had reached out to 7 nations for help policing the strait, but declined to say whether any had agreed to assist. For any that decline, he said, we will remember. Publicly, many countries have been non-committal to such an escort mission until hostilities cease, given the risks involved, including Iran's mining of the waterway. This pressure for the White House to announce such a coalition underscores the dilemma facing it. Gasoline prices continue to rise, and questions swirl from within the Republican Party as to the end game. The military operation has resulted in the striking of more than 6,000 Iranian targets and the killing of Iran's supreme leader and other top regime officials. But the strategic problems, growing instability in the Middle East, a global energy crisis, and the domestic political fallout have proven hard to manage through bombing alone. In a joint statement on Sunday, the foreign ministers of the UK and members of the Gulf Cooperation Council said Council states have the right to take all necessary measures to defend their security and stability and protect territories, citizens, and residents. The weekend rhetoric came as the Iran operation entered its 3rd week. Energy Secretary Chris Wright on Sunday said he believed the war would end in a couple of weeks, which he predicted would lead to a fall in energy prices. Trump, meanwhile, said the U.S. planned to bomb the Iranian shoreline along the strait. Last week, Trump asserted the U.S. had won the war to stop Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. The average U.S. gasoline price on Sunday was $3.70 a gallon, according to AAA, up from $2.93 1 month ago. The cost of diesel has risen to $4.97 from $3.66 in that span. Red-blue state gap on income taxes gets even wider. Democrats and Republicans are accusing each other of irresponsibility. By Richard Rubin and Gene Wayland. U.S. politics are getting more polarized, and increasingly so are state income tax systems. Republican-led states are racing each other to flatten, cut, and eliminate individual income taxes, with 23 states lowering their top income tax rates since 2021. Mississippi and Oklahoma, among others, put themselves on the paths to eliminate personal income taxes. South Carolina is setting a course this year to drop its top income tax rate to 1.99%, In Missouri, residents may vote this November on a plan to phase out income taxes and allow lawmakers to expand sales taxes. Democratic controlled states are moving the opposite way, pushing to increase taxes on top earners to combat inequality and plug budget holes expected from Republicans' cuts to federal health and nutrition assistance programs. Washington State's legislature last week sent Governor Bob Ferguson a bill that would create a 9.9% income tax on earnings over $1 million. New York City Mayor Zoran Mandani is pushing state lawmakers to raise income taxes on high-income households. Increases on top earners are a priority for some Democrats and progressive groups as they head to elections this fall in Rhode Island and Colorado. The middle ground is quickly disappearing. In 2006, 15 states had top income tax rates on wage income below 5%, and just one exceeded 10%, according to the Tax Foundation, a group that favors lower rates and fewer breaks. Now, more than half of the states have gone below 5%, and 5 others, plus the District of Columbia, are in double digits. As Democrats and Republicans run in different directions, they are accusing each other of irresponsibility. Democrats warn that tax cuts will slash state revenue and services to the bone, pointing to Kansas's failed tax cut experiment in 2012 to 13, which caused a sharp slide in revenue and a downgrade of the state's credit rating. Republicans caution that higher taxes will risk an exodus by wealthy residents who create jobs. Jared Walczak, who analyzes state policy for the Tax Foundation, said he expects the divergence to continue as states pick one path or the other. I expect a hollowing out of the middle, he said. There will be very little that is attractive about being broadly average. Republicans have been particularly active, pushing income taxes downward and exploring property tax cuts too. Humanoid Robots Step into New Factory Roles by John Keelman, Cheraw, South Carolina. Inside a Schaeffler Auto Parts factory, a most unusual worker toils away. Stepping gingerly across the metal floor, it holds its 4-fingered hands at chest level until it reaches its objective, a 25-pound basket of bearing components fresh from a stamping press. The worker uncurls its claw-like fingers, daintily grips the basket by its edges, and walks it over to a conveyor that will send it through an industrial washing machine. About a minute after it grabbed the first basket off a pallet, it returns to grab another. So it goes for 8 hours a day, basket after basket, pallet after pallet. A year ago, a person did this job. Now it belongs to a humanoid robot called Digit that was built for grunt work. Its legs angle backward like an ostrich, raising its stability and lifting power. Its LED eyes blink to signal to human co-workers where it is directing its attention. Schaeffler, a global manufacturer that makes parts for cars and airplanes, said it plans to deploy more of the robots in the coming months. Factories have used stationary robots since the 1960s, for tasks such as welding frames and attaching windshields. But advances in batteries, motors, and artificial intelligence have spawned a new generation, general-purpose robots that can walk around a plant and perform multiple jobs. Now for U.S. Government Watch. Airlines push for workers to get paid. Top executives of major carriers, including Delta Airlines, American Airlines, and Southwest Airlines, are urging Congress to restore funding to the Department of Homeland Security and pass bills guaranteeing that air traffic controllers and airport security officers get paid during government shutdowns. Once again, air travel is the political football amid another government shutdown. The executives wrote in an open letter to Congress published Sunday online and in the Washington Post. The partial government shutdown is causing long wait times at airports at the start of the busy spring travel season. Funding for DHS lapsed in February. Thousands of federal workers are working without pay, including Transportation Security Administration officials who missed their first paychecks Friday. And that was by Nicole Friedman. A broad and erratic patchwork of severe weather rumbled across much of the U.S. on Sunday, dumping heavy snow and making roads impassable in the upper Midwest, while damaging high winds swept across the plains. Hawaii also continues to be affected by severe flooding. Portions of the Mid-South readied for late-day thunderstorms that forecasters say would spread eastward and by Monday threaten a large swath of the eastern U.S., with mid-Atlantic states plus Washington, D.C., most at risk for high winds and tornadoes. Successive punches of snow, wind, and severe weather are going to impact the eastern half of the United States, AccuWeather senior meteorologist Tyler Roys said. You're looking at several major airports being impacted, he said. Russia tests internet shutdowns in Moscow. Iran used the system as it sought to suppress recent protest. Residents can't pay online bills, check on elderly relatives, or get their medication. By Matthew Luxmore and Milan Cherny. Russia is stepping up its test of systems designed to keep millions of people from accessing information online in times of political unrest, shutting off mobile internet access in the capital in recent days. People in Moscow, a city of 13 million, have found themselves unable to pay online bills or message co-workers in recent days. Commuters stepping out of the city's subway stations can't order a cab to the office. Unable to access online maps, many are asking strangers for directions for the first time in years. Those who normally work from home are filling cafes as they seek a stable Wi-Fi connection. In recent months, dozens of Russian regions have gone offline suddenly. The Kremlin has defended the shut-offs as necessary to protect Russians from attacks by Ukrainian drones, which can use local cell phone towers for navigation. But analysts say what Russians are actually experiencing is the trial of a nationwide system Moscow has been honing to limit information and hobble connectivity in times of upheaval, inspired by lessons from Iran and other authoritarian states. This is a system they have wanted to build for years. Now the threat of Ukrainian drones is a perfect chance to test it nationwide, an expert on Russia's internet at the German Council on Foreign Affairs said. They use it as a pretext, even in regions where there is no such danger. Residents say the worst drop-offs have been happening closest to the seat of Russian power. The nearer you are to the Kremlin, the more severe the restrictions are, said a 29-year-old IT professional. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, The Real Nuclear History of Iran. It has always wanted a weapon, and Obama's deal didn't stop it. So much of today's media framing of the Iran war relies on a mythology of what came before. The gist is that Iran was contained by Barack Obama until Donald Trump mucked it up, and now the regime will really pursue nuclear weapons. Naive is too kind a word for this deceptive partisan history. The real history is worth rehearsing because it shows that Iran's regime has been relentless for decades in its quest for the bomb, which is why President Trump is weakening it by force. A good date to start is 2002, when Israel helped expose Iran's secret nuclear sites at Natanz and Iraq. These are where the regime was pursuing a bomb via uranium and plutonium. That same year, Iran tested its design for a nuclear implosion device, all in violation of its nuclear non-proliferation treaty obligations. Iran denied wanting a bomb, and in 2007, a U.S. National Intelligence estimate reported, with high confidence, that Iran had ceased its organized effort to develop nuclear bombs in 2003 after the U.S. invasion of Iraq. The worry in Tehran in 2003 was that it could be next. Iran's president called the report a gift from God. Others saw it as a politicization of intelligence to block George W. Bush from confronting Iran. That was the effect, even as Iran helped kill 600 U.S. soldiers and foment chaos in Iraq. Only later did we learn how misleading that intelligence finding was. The most conclusive evidence came in 2018 when Israel whisked Iran's secret nuclear archives out of Tehran. The records proved that, far from ending its nuclear weapons program, after 2003, Iran decentralized and dispersed but continued its activities. Weaponization was concealed or pursued at universities when dual-use civilian cover was plausible. In 2009, the U.S. learned Iran had been building a facility deep under a mountain near Qom, designed to enrich uranium to weapons grade. Again, Iran claimed its purpose was peaceful, but then why bury it and not tell inspectors until the U.S. was onto it? This became the Fordow facility that the U.S. bombed in June with special earth-penetrating bombs. Enter Mr. Obama, who made a nuclear deal with Iran a top priority. The talks dragged on for years as Iran pressed forward with enrichment, repression at home and terror abroad, while Mr. Obama did little in response. The regime's negotiating goal was to win economic relief from sanctions while preserving and legitimizing its nuclear program. Iran finally agreed to a deal in late 2015 after a series of U.S. concessions. The Obama team allowed enrichment and let Iran keep the infrastructure that could be used to reach weapons grade when Iran felt the time was right. Mr. Obama backtracked to let Iran operate at Fordow and Iraq and keep 5,000 centrifuges at Natanz. He gave up on anytime, anywhere inspections. Iran didn't even have to detail all of its past nuclear activities. The deal's restrictions would sunset after 5, 8, 9, or 15 years, depending on the provision, and it weakened restraints on Iran's missiles. In the deal's first week, Iran received $30 billion in sanctions relief. Qasem Soleimani, the Quds Force chief, immediately flew to Moscow and secured Russia's military intervention in Syria. Then the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, arrested 4 Americans and held them for a trade. The deal didn't change the regime's hostile behavior, and Iran kept building its proxy network. Mr. Trump quit the deal in 2018 and escalated sanctions. If he hadn't, Iran and its proxies would be more dangerous now. The regime would be legally advancing its nuclear program from a position of strength. President Biden made it his goal to redo the Obama deal and stopped enforcing oil sanctions. Iran pretended to negotiate, but accelerated its uranium enrichment to the doorstep of weapons grade. It also hid nuclear material and repeatedly lied to inspectors as the International Atomic Energy Agency finally concluded in 2025. In October 2023, Iran's proxies started a regional war by massacring Israelis, taking hostages, raining down rockets, and attacking global shipping. Israel fought back, and Iran, for the first time, attacked Israel directly with missiles. The U.S. first joined in defense, and then, under Mr. Trump, joined to attack the nuclear facilities last June. The months since have been the first time in 20 years Iran hasn't enriched uranium. Before and after the June attack, Mr. Trump gave Iran every chance to dismantle its nuclear program and reach a new deal. But even with a U.S. armada in the region, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei insisted on keeping the capabilities to pursue a bomb. He put that above everything. He had done the same with Mr. Obama, and perhaps he thought Mr. Trump would also settle for a bad deal. He was wrong, fatally so for himself and maybe yet for the regime. Critics of Mr. Trump's bombing campaign now say it will motivate Iran to pursue nuclear weapons in earnest, but that's what it has been doing for years. Critics also say the IRGC will now steer the ship of state, but it's been doing that since the days of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The IRGC's humiliation of Iran's president in recent days only lifts that veil. No one knows how this war will evolve, But one certainty since June is that the nuclear designs of a fanatical, anti-American regime has been set back years. A race to a bomb will now be more difficult, with Israel and the U.S. poised to intervene. Iran's regime also faces serious economic, domestic, and international problems that will last well beyond the war. Bill Clinton faced a similar moment of truth with North Korea in the 1990s before it had the bomb, and he chose to trust Pyongyang's diplomatic promises. North Korea lied and cheated and built a bomb anyway. Now it is building missiles that could reach the U.S. Mr. Trump chose to act instead after his predecessors didn't, and that is a service to the world. Another editorial put Chuck Schumer on TSA duty. As the lines at airport security get worse, frustrated travelers should know who's to blame. Senator Chuck Schumer. Democrats have refused to fund the Department of Homeland Security, producing a shutdown that now has dragged on for a month. TSA airport screeners are calling out of work since they aren't getting paid. The Transportation Security Administration's nationwide absence rate on March 6 was 8%, according to agency figures obtained last week by CBS, but in some places it has been much higher. At Houston's Hobby Airport, the network reported 53% of officers called out on March 8th, with 47% calling out the following day. The wait hit 3 hours. Other TSA workers are outright quitting, and it's hard to blame them. They received a partial paycheck last month. Then, on payday last week, they got nothing. This financial hardship arrives only months after last fall's shutdown, when Mr. Schumer didn't reopen the government for a record 43 days. Do Democrats think TSA staff should simply put up with this treatment? Over the long term, one answer is to let TSA regulate security checkpoints while having more airports spin off the actual operation to private entities. That could free workers and travelers from Congress's political games. The same goes, by the way, for air traffic controllers who also were told to work without pay during last year's shutdown. That said, the only solution for today's crazy TSA lines is for Mr. Schumer to fund the Department of Homeland Security. If he won't, maybe he ought to go down to JFK Airport, put on a uniform, and help. While he's there, he can offer apologies to the public in person. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the opinion pages. The high cost of affordability. Government causes price hikes, and politicians naturally blame capitalism. By Andy Kessler. With oil prices flying, you can surely hear someone screaming, $120 to fill my Ford F-150 pickup? Who's to blame? The answer is government, but that won't stop the affordability screechers from turning the volume up to 11. They have plenty of practice. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wrote in December, "The American people want leaders who are laser-focused on making life affordable for all." Senator Bernie Sanders told the Majority Report in December, affordability can't be another poll-tested slogan that politicians throw around, as he threw around the word affordability. Donald Trump said in his State of the Union address, "Now the same people in this chamber who voted for those disasters, like the Orwellian named Inflation Reduction Act, suddenly use the word affordability, a word they just used it because somebody gave it to them, knowing full well that they caused and created the increased prices." Meanwhile, Mr. Trump's tariffs increased producer prices. There's enough affordability blame to go around. At a Senate hearing last month, Senator Elizabeth Warren said, "Grocery prices are up, electricity prices are up, healthcare prices are up, the cost of building housing is up. Why?" As the comic strip Pogo noted in 1970, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." Economist Mark J. Perry's famous chart of the century shows that since 2000, prices for things that government touches, hospital services, college tuition, textbooks, housing, and food, have risen faster than overall inflation. Meanwhile, free market items like computers, software, televisions, and cell phone services, thanks Silicon Valley, as well as clothing, furniture, toys, and even new cars, thanks globalization, have dropped in price or rose less than inflation after taking into account the increased value of technology like 75-inch smart TVs. Try streaming March Madness on your 1980s 50-pound 19-inch Sony Trinitron. Housing. Bankrate says nationally, over 75% of U.S. homes on the market are unaffordable to the typical household, meaning carrying cost of more than 30% of income. It isn't a mystery why. Zoning restrictions, permitting delays, environmental reviews, rent control, and eviction hurdles. In California, a mandate requiring solar hookups adds up to $10,000 to the upfront cost of new homes, according to California's own Energy Commission. Solutions make it worse. New York Socialist Mayor Zoran Mandani made a campaign promise to construct 200,000 permanently affordable, union-built, rent-stabilized homes. Almost every word of that means higher housing prices. Medical care. Obamacare in 2010 added gold-plated mandates with coverage for everything under the sun. Since it passed, premiums have tripled, according to researcher Avik Roy. Medicare and Medicaid distort market pricing. Senator Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, has a health care bill that would solve many of health care's problems with health savings accounts and pooled insurance buying. It can't get arrested in Washington. College. Tuition rises like a helium balloon. Why? Former Sallie Mae boss A.I. Lord told the Journal in 2021 schools were able to hike tuition since students now had expanded access to loans backed by the government. Now check how much the average professor makes at your alma mater. Food. Government is like white on rice as to why $10 lunches are now $20. Sugar import restrictions, ethanol mandates, minimum wage, tariffs, fuel cost, even war in wheat exporting Ukraine. Energy. Higher gasoline prices were avoidable with more U.S. oil production. The U.S. Geological Survey says we may be sitting on 29 billion barrels of undiscovered, technically recoverable oil reserves, almost half in Alaska. California is oil rich, yet imports oil. 18% of it from Iraq. Crazy. Add green and renewable mandates, no nuclear power. Plus, there are too many taxes: property, sales, transfer, hotel, and even food delivery taxes added to DoorDash. Add Minnesota and now California Medicaid fraud. What scares me is that government can mandate affordability anytime it wants. Simply announce price controls. When you fix prices, you get shortages. Soviet supermarkets with empty shelves. Or available apartments in rent-controlled New York. Can't get home insurance? Many state price caps sent insurers scurrying away, especially in coastal and flood-prone areas. Drug shortages are next, and consumer credit if we cap credit card interest rates. In sectors with affordability problems, Adam Smith's invisible hand got smashed by a giant regulatory gavel. Competition and freedom from constraints lower prices. The Bernies and AOCs of the world complain about capitalism. Naive, but on brand. By invoking affordability, what they're really protesting, with zero self-awareness, is the socialism-inspired heavy hand of the U.S. government, feds, meds, and eds. Those who yell the loudest about affordability are actually making the case for smaller government. Who wants to tell them? Gavin Newsom is driving up gasoline prices. Californians pay $5.48 a gallon on average, and military jet fuel is getting dangerously expensive. By Alicia Finley. Who's rooting harder for higher oil prices, Gavin Newsom or his liberal allies in the press? Last week came breathless headlines warning that the U.S. is on the brink of a recession from surging oil prices. Leading the pessimist concerto, Bloomberg News claimed that a diving stock market and a $100 a barrel crude could augur a financial crisis as catastrophic as the 2008-9 crash. Reality check. Crude prices today are about half their inflation-adjusted peak in 2008. The S&P 500 stock index is 17% higher than it was a year ago. If all goes according to the media's wishes, the war in Iran will precipitate an economic cataclysm and vindicate their disastrous predictions for the Trump presidency. Equally cynical is Mr. Newsom, who is attacking Mr. Trump for increasing gasoline prices, even as he pushes policies that drive prices up in his own state, where they now average $5.48 a gallon. Prices are going up in Texas and Oklahoma the same as they are in California, the governor's office said on March 10th. This is Trump's Iran price spike, and more drilling or refining in California would not necessarily help today's gas price spikes. Very likely it would. While gasoline prices have increased by an average of 74 cents a gallon nationwide over the past month, they've shot up 91 cents in the Golden State. California has experienced much higher price increases than other states because the majority of the state's gasoline is refined from foreign crude oil sources, noted Candace Redd, a spokeswoman for the Automobile Club of Southern California. About 60% of the crude that feeds California refineries is imported, a third of it from the Middle East. 15% of its gasoline also comes from overseas, largely from Asian refineries that obtain crude from the Middle East. As a result, wholesale market gasoline prices in California are set by more expensive foreign refiners. That's one reason prices have increased more in California than in the rest of the country, even though crude is traded globally. Yet, Mr. Newsom had the hoopla to claim credit for declining gasoline prices before the war. California gas prices have been stable and significantly lower than the historic 2022 and 23 price spikes, he says. He has drill, baby drill, to thank for that. But the difference between prices in California and the U.S. average has notably increased. Californians paid 90 cents a gallon more than average at the start of his governorship in January 2019. $1.05 more before Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, and $1.50 more before the war in Iran started. Now the gap is $1.80. Call it Mr. Newsom's price spike. Since he became governor, the state's oil production has plunged 40%, and a quarter of its refining capacity has shut down. It doesn't require a 960 SAT score to recognize the culprits. Anti-fossil fuel policies, including the state's cap and tax program, limitations on drilling, low carbon fuel standard, burdensome permitting, and high gasoline taxes. California's gasoline tax, which includes a 61 cent a gallon excise tax plus state and local sales tax, is the highest in the country and increases every year with inflation. Mr. Newsom last week said the state has to charge drivers more because it isn't receiving its fair share of federal highway funding. What does he consider a fair share? It is now evident that California's regulatory environment has driven out actors necessary for an affordable energy consumer market. More than a dozen Democratic state lawmakers wrote to state regulators last week. This crisis is not